and welcome to Church in Maine, a podcast for people interested in the intersection of faith, politics, and culture. I'm Dennis Sanders, your host. So I want to let you in on a little secret. I use AI, or artificial intelligence. I actually use it to help produce this podcast. I have a tool that can kind of help with audio, kind of balancing things out. And I use it for other things as well. I actually do help it to write things like podcast descriptions, like the description for this episode. I use that. I do actually use it with some edits on my end. So I actually almost never cut and paste it. I'm always kind of looking to see how it makes it and what I want it to do. I don't use it for writing sermons. Partially because I think that sermons are to be, that's really, you're bringing God's word to the people, and that shouldn't come from ChatGPT or Claude. But I do use AI in a lot of different ways. And yet I feel really wary of sharing that because there is so much anxiety surrounding AI. We worry about things like data centers, the potential loss of jobs from AI, people entering into relationships with chatbots, and of course, the fear that AI could go all Skynet or Matrix on us. And for the kids, I'm referring to two movies from the 80s and 90s where AI tried to destroy humanity. Now, as I said in a recent podcast, the release of the most recent papal encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas, by Pope Leo, laid out some concerns with AI. And I haven't read the full document, but I think that the Pope is helping the church start to think about what AI is for. How do we use technology? Now, the media, though, tended to hone in on the problems with AI, and that's all left me wondering, is there anything good about AI? Do people in the church think that there's anything good about AI? Well, for one pastor, AI isn't a threat. Instead, she sees it as a tool for love. Episcopal priest Cathie Caimano wrote in her Substack how the Pope's encyclical shows that AI can be actually used for love. And she wrote in her essay this following quote, "We have the choice to share love in this world or division. We have the choice to use technology for harm or indifference to our neighbors, or use it to build relationships, foster community, care for one another in God's name, and tell the saving story of Jesus," unquote. Now, her message is really so different from a lot of people in the media, but especially from a lot of church leaders. So I really wanted to have her on the podcast to talk about this. And so in this episode, I am welcoming back Father Cathie Caimano on the podcast. And before we go into that discussion, a little bit about her. She calls herself a free-range priest in North Carolina, where she works with a lot of small parishes out there. So with that out of the way, I hope that you will join me in this engaging conversation about seeing AI as a tool for love with Cathie Caimano. Well, Cathie, it is good to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you.
Kind of before we go into our discussion, maybe just a very quick intro for people who haven't heard from you before.
Yes, really quick intro is a hard thing with me, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here. My name is Cathie Caimano. Father Cathie, I'm also known as. I'm an Episcopal priest of 26 years, and I've been a free-range priest for the last decade. And what that means is I work at reimagining ministry in the digital age, how we do and be church in new ways in this new context in the new church. And I'm just leave it at that. That's kind of the basics of who I am and what I'm doing here.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to have you back on is to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, which is all in the news these days,
Yeah.
especially since the release of Pope Leo's encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, which focuses on AI. I will admit I'm still reading it, going through it. It's a fascinating read. Um,
It is.
but you had an interesting article
Yeah.
that came up, and the reason I wanted to talk to you is because your article is so different than a lot of stuff I see on Substack or in the media, where AI is almost always viewed as a threat. It's a danger. Um,
Yeah.
and so, but I mean, the title of your post says it all. You said the Pope says use AI for love. And
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted to talk to you about what led you to write the article and what is it all about? How do you see AI as being used for love?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the question. Thanks for reading my article and thanks for inviting me here again. I'm so glad you asked because I am very pro AI, if you will. I do recognize that there are dangers and mostly that there are, most things we don't know, right? And that's one of the things that's
Hmm.
so scary about it is we're on the verge of something. So I want to start right by saying that, that I certainly don't have knowledge that other people don't, and I'm not without fears about AI. On the other hand, I was part of a discussion group in another online group about AI, and we were just getting together to talk about AI in church. And I have to say, like, I mean, I was really taken aback. Like, so this happened a few weeks before the encyclical came out about the negative feelings. Like, I was not prepared for that because I am very pro technology, very pro AI. Mostly, what I love so much personally about AI is that how to put it, it puts into relief who we are as human beings, right?
Hmm.
So to me, I mean, human beings have souls. We are made in the image of God, right? And a machine can never be that. And it's one thing that a machine can never do. And so to me, it's like so much of what's about AI is about reducing things to tasks, right? So it's about our human productivity. It's about what we can and can't do as humans. And when you think about that, there is no question that AI is already smarter than us, stronger than us, that sort of thing. It never gets tired. It never has a bad day. It can work 24/7. You don't have to pay it. And it knows so many more things than we know. But is that what makes us human? And I personally do not think that that's what makes us human. I think what makes us human is that we are made in the image of God. And I think that each and every one of us has but one job on this earth, and that is learning to love and be loved. That's what we're here for. That's the big meaning of life. And that's just how I see it as a Christian and as a pastor, as a priest. And so to me, what makes it fascinating about AI is what it can't do, right? And how
Hmm.
clearly, like, AI writing is and a lot of times kind of empty, right? Like it uses a lot of words that don't seem to have a lot of meaning, right? AI art, like, yes, I'm sure if you tried really hard, you could probably fake me out and you could say, was this done by AI? And I would get it wrong. But when you really think about it, the music and art and that sort of thing, it's lacking soul. There's not that underlying, it's not the technique. It's that art is about reflecting God's beauty into this world, right? And so that's why I loved it. And I was totally unprepared to be in a room of other Christians who were just uniformly like, this is a terrible thing. We need to regulate it. We need to stop doing, all this kind of stuff. So imagine my surprise. Well, first, so I was taken aback by that. It was just news to me. It was just not my experience and not what I had read or been part of in, before this. So when the Pope put out the encyclical, and then at first, I didn't read the encyclical. I just read the news stories about it, and it was like everything was negative. And I put it in my blog. It said, like, the New York Times, Pope Leo warns of risks. The Atlantic, Pope Leo's unsettling vision of the AI future. Reuters, Pope urging AI regulation warns that some weapons now beyond humanity's control. And I actually thought to myself, I have great respect for the Pope, and I'm so excited about our new American Pope, and I think he's lovely. And I'm a former Roman Catholic, but even if I weren't, I still think that the Pope deserves the respect of his position and who he is. And I was like, truly, is there no true theology in this whole encyclical? And so imagine my surprise when I took it upon myself to go directly to the encyclical when I felt like it was full of that kind of um, basically calling us to love and calling us to truly be the human beings made in the image of God that we are. And so one of the comments that I worked my blog around was that comment where the Pope says, questioning this alternative path of progress and how we interpret and live it is ultimately a matter of examining our own hearts. The way we understand and shape relationships, work, and institutions in practice reveals our fundamental values. In the end, it all stems from what we hold most dear. This is a love that guides us as to what we truly cherish, both as individuals and as a society, and directs our lives and actions. And the one other thing I'm going to say, and then I'm sure you have questions, but first of all, that's totally spoke to me. And I felt that sense of love throughout. Yes, he does. Like the New York Times did not misquote the Pope. Like he absolutely does warn of weapons and all sorts of other things. There's nothing that is not factually incorrect. But to me, I felt that sense of love and sense of the Pope calling us to use AI to basically express our values and our callings. I felt like it shined right through it. And the other part of what sort of prompted me to write the article was this idea of we. Like, and this I got in the conversation too. This I feel like there's this sense that we need to be against AI and we need to go and protest and we need to get the government to make regulations or get these billionaires to stop doing that or start doing that. And one of the amazing powers I think that AI does give us is that we, me, you, individual people, we are also now more powerful and faster at our work than we have ever been before. We have this amazing tool to use it for love, right? We don't have to, we can, but we don't necessarily have to use our energy to try to work against other people, other institutions, other kind of like, sort of like was taking this away from a personal thing into saying, well, you shouldn't do that and you should do that and this should happen and that shouldn't happen, into I have a calling. I have something I need to say or need to do that can be amplified and made easier through AI. And so to me, this is a calling to us, each of us individually, to say, how am I using these tools to love God and love my neighbor, to make love more, to basically live out my calling, to learn how to be loved and to live in this world in love and in peace. And, and, again, ironically, it's AI that gives us that power. I mean, we have the power to do it because we're humans, but now we have tools in front of us that everyday people like you and me have platforms. We have abilities to reach people. We have abilities to create things in ways that we can package them and engage people with. And we can do that right here in the guest room of my mother's house where I am right now, right? And so to me, that's a calling, that's a challenge in a really good way. There's nothing I can do. I don't really feel there's much I can do to influence what the owners of the tech companies are doing. Honestly, I don't feel like there's much I can do to influence what the government is doing. But I don't have to. I now have tools in front of me that I can use to do these things that make the world the kind of world that I want to live in.
I think one of the questions that I have, and I'm probably closer to your view when it comes to AI, is why do people have such fear about AI? I mean, there is just, I mean, you talked about people in your group of pastors and other church leaders. There just seems to be this really fear of it and also maybe almost a desire that we can just wish it away. Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, I do think this is a paradigm shift. I mean, like somebody I can't remember, I was talking to somebody, I was reading this, but somebody compared it to like the discovery of fire, right? Like it's
Hmm.
even like I compared it to like the printing press, but I think it's wider than that. This is a fundamental shift in how our world works and what we can do in the world. And I think that is all change. People hate change, right? Especially church people, but people in general hate change, and we can't control it. And we like just like fire, it can be used for amazing things. It can also be incredibly destructive. And so I think if we are used to a world in which humans, ultimately have like the power and the intellectual ability to affect change and to do things in the world, we now have created something that's now creating itself to do things that we literally can't dream of right now. And so I can see that lack of control. Just like we don't know how this is going to end. I mean, again, it's sort of like climate change, and we may differ on our thoughts about climate change. To me, it's not whether or not the climate is changing.
It
It's
is.
that it is, and we are part of this. Like, to me, we're part of a story, right? That honestly God has written, and only God knows the answer to it. And to try to fight that, I think, is futile, but I also think it's not faithful, right? Like I think this idea that we are the center of things and we get to decide and we get to control is hard for all of us. I mean, I just think that's the human way, and that our lives are not our own and our world is not our own. And again, yes, we can affect change in certain ways. But on the other hand, there is so much that there's not anything we can do about, right? And so I think that AI brings that up to the surface. We can't control it, and it could
Hmm.
be catastrophic. And so that just brings up this like terrible, and also I think there's this shadowy sense in some corners, maybe in more corners than I'd like to think, this idea that there are bad actors, right? That there are bad governments or bad people, or trying to use these to cause harm. And I'm not saying there aren't, right? Like, to be totally honest, like, I don't dispute that. But again, to me, that's the age old thing, right? That's always been true. There's
Hmm.
always been bad actors, bad governments, whatever, trying to use any kind of technology to harm other people. And so, yeah, that may not have answered your question, but I think that's where it's coming from. It doesn't surprise me that people are so there's so much fear, but I think it brings out it comes out as anger.
Well, it reminds me a lot of, you talked about fire, and I guess this is something that's also related, is uh, the splitting of the atom, nuclear
Well, yeah,
power.
right, yeah,
Because, on the one hand, it can create I think in my view, a great power source that's clean, um,
yeah,
and can
yeah,
power just total many homes, but it can also create a weapon that can destroy millions.
right,
So it's this thing that can be used for good and can be used for evil, and you know, but there are lots of things out there in our world that have these kind of dual uses that can be good and bad, and the question is, how do we use these things that are very powerful?
right. And I think our distrust, and again, I think it's pretty obvious we live in a time of great distrust, and this
Hmm.
distrust of like, I want people like me to have access to these things, and I don't want people like you, whoever you are, to have access to these things. And I get very stressed when people like you have access, because who knows what you'll do with it. But people like me, we will be very responsible. But I just think that's a false dichotomy, and this goes back to what makes us human, right? I think it both underestimates humanity and also overestimates humanity. And again, this goes back to my faith and saying, like, ultimately, we are all sinners, right? Like, none of us has got like the moral high ground over other people. We just sin in different ways, right? Like, none of us
Hmm.
is perfect. And I mean, yeah, I feel like whoever's in charge of these things, I am still going to have some level of fear that they are going to misuse them or whatever. But on the other hand, that's the human condition, right? We live in a fallen world. And, occasionally we live up to the best we can be, and that's awesome. Often enough, we don't. But I guess one of the reasons I'm not afraid is that I do believe that we live in a story of a God that is redeeming the world. And I do believe in resurrection. And I think if all of that is true, even the worst things that could possibly happen aren't keeping us from the ultimate, salvation of us all.
There was, I recently actually talked to another Episcopal priest, Michael DeLashmutt, and about AI. And one of the things that he talks about
Mm-hmm.
is that we should be focusing on presence over intelligence. And I think for a long time as humans, we think, and it's even in our name of Homo sapien, it's based on intelligence. And what
Yeah.
AI does is kind of say, okay, you have this artificial thing that is intelligent, can do things, can do all of these things. Is that what makes us human? And his whole thing
Yeah.
is, no, it's about presence. And, we could even stretch this out to what about people who have, intellectual disabilities? Are they not human because they don't have intelligence?
Right. Of
No.
course not.
And,
Right. Right.
I think what AI is doing is in some ways might be focusing on, and I think you've even said about this, is that intelligence is important. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not necessarily what makes us human.
Right. That goes back to soul. So, I mean, to me, it's love. I mean,
Hmm.
he
Yeah.
says presence, but to me, it's love, right? Machines can't love, right? Humans can love, right? How can we love? Because we're made in the image of God. How are we made in the image of God? We are inspirited with souls, right? And so no machine can do that, right? Ever. And again, to me, that is the thing that I love the most about AI is it makes it so clear the value of love. And that's what we proclaim as Christians, right? That love is stronger than death, that love is all that matters, right? And we know that this is true. This may seem tangential, but I get that way. I remember on September 11th, I had just left New York City. I just had moved away from New York City just weeks before September 11th. And I had friends who died that day, and I had several friends who were in the World Trade Center and escaped with their lives, or at Trinity Wall Street Church and escaped with their lives. And I know people who called their loved ones because the cell phone was relatively new. Many people who were about to die called their loved ones. What did they say? Every last one of them said, I love you, right? Go on with your life, love others. And not one of them, as far as I know, said, go avenge my death, go kill other people because of what happened to me. No, when you're in your last moments of life, you know that it's true. The only thing that matters is love. And so
Mhm.
when we get into AI and its power, it shows to me that it's even more powerful. Again, our lives, our ability to love. That is the only thing that matters in the end. And it's making it more valuable, right? And we see this in the world where people long for community, they long for relationship, they long for love. And ultimately love comes from God, and it comes from being made in the image of God. And so therefore, again, someone who's a pastor, who's a priest, it's just like, woohoo, now you see it. Now you see why this is so valuable. This is what you need. This is all you need. And it also, like, if one version of AI that people project, which is that it's going to take people's jobs, if you take that out further, what people hope is going to do is make work. You don't have to do work anymore unless you want to be creating things out of your own creativity. In other words, it will eliminate the need to work in order to get the basics necessities of life, which would be awesome, which I think it is already giving us so much more free time. And then when we have all this free time, what do we do with it, right? Like, ultimately, it's about our purpose in life and who we are as humans and why that's so valuable. And again, that just makes me super excited.
So, kind of going back on the title, how have you used AI in a way that you think is for love, especially for love of God and love of neighbor?
Well, I mean, right now I use AI so much for my work. Like, I have
Hmm.
created all these sort of dashboards for my various I have all sorts of, I work on contract and I work here and there, I consult and all these sorts of things. So I create dashboards for all of my work, and I have AI coordinate and sort of, create frameworks for the work that I do. And I feel like my whole ministry is made possible by AI. And even though I will say that people are like, oh, don't use AI for sermons, I will say, first of all, on Easter Sunday 2 years ago, I did this little trick to my congregation. I had AI write me an Easter sermon. And
Mm-hmm.
I got up in the pulpit, which I never get in the pulpit anymore. I almost always preach from the ground. I got up in the pulpit. I opened up a piece of paper, which I also never do. I don't use notes. And I just read this sermon that AI had written from the page. And it was a perfectly this is the resurrection and Jesus and all that. And everybody just stared at me like this. And I got down from the pulpit and I was like, what, was that it? And they all laughed. And I was like, what did you think? And then I confessed that AI had written it. And then I said, and they were like, oh, thank God, that didn't sound like you at all. And I was like, why didn't it? And then I talked about that idea of it didn't convey my soul. It didn't convey my belief. It didn't convey my joy. It didn't all of that kind of stuff. And so I did that. But I still do use AI for sermons because I can say could you please review 2,700 sermons on the Transfiguration and give me the things the points that people most often make, right? And that's awesome. Or can you research what this Hebrew word means and in what context, and how close is this to a modern day understanding of what this Hebrew word meant, and how might that be different than people at the time might use this Hebrew word, and something that might take me weeks to research at a time that I do not have. I get a report from AI that gives me all of this word study, all of this context, all of this history that then I can use in my sermon, and it empowers me, I think, to preach better.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I kind of wrestle about the whole using it for sermons. Obviously, writing is an issue, but it sounds like you're using it more for the sermon preparation, the study,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
you feel that enriches because it's pulling in a lot of stuff that you wouldn't be able to find or to look for.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably do it, but it would take me months, and I don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
Also, I have this online thing called Traco, which is a gym for your soul. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
ancient Christian practice. Um, and so once a week, I do a live stream where I interview, and I put this in a quotation marks, an ancient church teacher, a monastic, an early church father or mother. And this is another great thing. I feel like that all these writings are in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
Do people really read them? Right. A lot of it is dense. A lot of it doesn't seem to be in any way have to do with their life. So I ask these questions. I come up with 5 questions, and then I ask AI, please research everything that St. Benedict ever said. And please answer these questions in St. Benedict's voice and use as many St. Benedict's quotes as you possibly can. And then I do this live stream where I interview St. Benedict, right? And I also use some obscure people writings that I'd never heard of or whatever. And so in this way, I feel like I'm sharing the wisdom of the monastics and the early church fathers and mothers with people who otherwise wouldn't. And people know who St. Benedict is, but a lot of people would have a hard time quoting St. Benedict or knowing anything St. Benedict said or did that is relevant to their lives today. And so I have this interview, Coffee with Coaches, I call it. And so I get to interview the monastics live on Substack, which I just think is the coolest thing ever. All of that fueled by AI.
Hmm.
I say that. I say by the magic of AI, I have created this thing. And yes, I do know AI can sometimes be wrong, and it's also possible that I've misquoted people. But honestly, I don't care. I'm doing the very best I can to share the wisdom of the monastics with people who are learning to love God and love their neighbor and interact with a Christian tradition. People who want to be Christian but don't know what that means, and there's a million different ways to be Christian, right? And there's all sorts of competing things that Christians are supposed to do or can't do or whatever. And so what I'm trying to do is go back to the first Christians. I like to say the people who knew Jesus. How did they live their lives? What did they believe? How is that relevant to us today? Let's go all the way back from the 21st to the 1st century and see if we can build a bridge. And I can whip that up in an hour uh, based on AI.
Hmm. I mean, one
So
of the
yeah.
things that people tend to say about AI, or at least their fear, is that it will do the thinking for you. Obviously, what
Mm,
I'm hearing from you is not that. You
hmm.
are asking for, information, but obviously you're also doing a lot of the prep work yourself. So it's not
Right.
that. But what do you
Right.
think about when people say that?
Yeah. I mean, I still feel like there is a lot of skill and creativity involved in basically asking the questions that you want to ask, like making the framework for what it is that you want to learn, right? And
Hmm.
so, like I talk like a certain with AI in schools and stuff. So, sure, like write a report about whatever the early church fathers. Yes, you could then just ask AI and it could write a report about the early church fathers. But it's going to decide what the scope of that is. And so to me, the question becomes like, what do you want to know? Like, why does this matter? Like, create a context for me. Why are we asking this question? And what good does it do? And so that has to come from you, right? You still have to ask the AI to do something, right? And so it's opening up this, like, I mean, again, like this amazing world of creativity. And I think in terms of students or even Christians or basically anybody doing their job, the question becomes, what's the question you're asking, right? If everything is
Hmm.
limitless, then it's like, I want to know certain things. Why? Right. And so then that why becomes incredibly important. And so, yes, on one hand, that is true. Of course, I can write that report, have that report written. And of course, all the stuff I just talked to you about researching my sermon and stuff. I'm not actually reading those books and doing that research. Um, but I had the idea, right? Like, so to me, it was the creativity of saying, wow, I could interview early church fathers and we could make this into something that helps you with your spiritual life, right? And so to me, it also opens these doors of ways like I read Saint Benedict in seminary, right? It's on my shelf. Have I opened it since in the last 30 years since I graduated from seminary? Nope. Now I can pull that book down and I can actually say to AI, hey, I have this book. I remember this was a really good book. Can you help me? Can you tell me what's in it and help me relate it to what it is that I'm talking about today? And so to me, that's actually helping me think. And but to answer your question, of course, I mean, yes, if we want to just be lazy and like put out slop, as we say, what do they call that? Is it slop? What AI
AI slop.
slush or
Yep.
slop? Yeah, that's fine. But I think this again gets me back to the soul, right? Where did I mean science, mathematics, art, reading, literature? It all started with the church, right? All of that started in monasteries and church institutions. Why? To bring people closer to God, because people were burning with this kind of knowledge, creativity, curiosity of how the world. I think we still are burning in that way, and this helps us to go deeper and farther than we ever thought we could. But yeah, of course, we could just also be lazy and like put out a bunch of slop. And that
Yeah,
tells me that I have more work to do to help people understand again, you have a soul, your life matters, you have a calling. And again, that goes back to the soul and love and being human, what makes us human and why it's so important.
yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that has been missing in the talk about AI is how do we use it? A lot of it has been either it's great and we, just don't ask any questions, or it's bad and we shouldn't use it. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of the belief that it's here. It's we engage with it in so many different ways in the world, and that as Christians, the question isn't is AI good or bad? It's how do we use this, and how do we use this to the glory of God? Um, because
Yeah.
that should be the question. But I feel like sometimes, especially the discussion right now, isn't there. It's you know I think you linked to an article by Albert Brooks, not Albert Brooks, Arthur
Yeah,
Brooks.
it was
Um,
Arthur Brooks, right? Albert Brooks.
yeah,
Wasn't he an actor?
he's an actor.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was interesting because he, of course, referenced another Leo, Leo the 13th, and Rerum Novarum, which is kind of, I have read that encyclical and I thought it was really good. And he, that one is talking about things on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. And one of the things that he talks about is the fact that while he had, was Leo the 13th was talking all about the dangers and how we should navigate things, it's not like it prevented bad things from happening. They still did. I mean, there were good things that happened. I
Right.
mean, obviously, there were
Right.
things in labor and laws and things that I think try to protect us from the more dangerous parts or overreach of capitalism. But there were still people who were crony capitalism or things to that extent. And he, lists other evils. And I think he was trying to say it's the same thing with AI, is that this is not going to prevent bad things from happening.
No.
Because we live in a
Right.
world with sin, it's going to happen.
Right.
But I think the question
Right.
is, how do we try to use this in a way that is ethical, in a way that is glorifying to God and that lifts up the dignity of humanity?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's so many things I want to say to that. Let me see if I can tease them out. 100% yes. I think that, again, I think there's this like fantasy in some people's heads or like out there, like that, like if we can just do this right, like we'll just do it step by step. But I think that like revolutions are certainly things like AI, like fire, like the Industrial Revolution, like the printing press. They come with a certain amount of chaos. That is just what happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're like progress mean, like these things happen, and then again, it goes back to being out of control. We can only learn what needs to be regulated by doing the bad things. I mean, because there's no roadmap. I mean, I don't think anybody actually means to do bad things. I mean, maybe some people do, but whatever. But for the most part, I think a lot of the bad things that happen are unintentional consequences of the new ways we can do things. And so I think we have to do them before we're going to find out the things that we have to pull back on. I mean, we have to. There's no other way to do it, which to me goes back to, do we think we can control everything? Which also brings back to the whole idea is, can we have, or do we imagine we are going to live in a world on Earth in which there is going to be no more suffering and nothing bad is going to happen? And I think the answer to that is equivocally no. Unequivocally no. Again, I believe, we are part of a story that doesn't belong to us. We live in a world that is mitigated by sin, and we are living in a time where Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ will come again, right? We are living in the midst of that time between Christ is risen and Christ will come again. And it's not of our making. And we actually can't, we're along for the ride, right? Which doesn't mean we don't have work to do and there aren't good and bad things we can do. I would also say that, and I think you said it too, that like Christianity does not promise that we won't suffer. Not at all. Suffering is baked into the story. Christianity promises that our suffering will be redeemed, right? And I think that it's so hard as humans to keep ourselves out of the role of the ultimate arbiter of, making everything right. And we can't do that. We can't have God's job. We hate that, but we cannot. And we should thank God that we can't have God's job because, again, we're all frail humans and all of us would make mistakes. Any one of us, the best intentioned people in the world are going to cause other people suffering. That's part of life, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
should not be afraid to live it. Not that I don't have compassion for suffering. Of course I do. But that sense of we also, I think, because we live in that story, we live in a world that is progressing. We don't know where we're going exactly, but I think that this sense that like we can't just say, okay, we've gotten far enough, we're going to stop. For whatever reason, we are moving forward in history towards something. And that seems really obvious, not of our doing and not of our making. And we don't know what the end is, except I believe it's good, right? On this side of heaven. But I will tell you one thing, and maybe I shouldn't say this on a podcast, but I actually had this thought the other day because I think about AI quite a bit, which is maybe this is Christ coming again. In this sense, if the people who make the AI world like sound all the good things, like AI is going to cure our diseases, it's going to cure climate control, it's going to teach us how to live together, it's going to make us healthy, body, mind, and spirit. It's going to produce things. We're going to get all the food we need for a fraction of the cost and none of the pollution and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to colonize Mars. All of the things happen. Let's just say it all happens that way and we don't make any mistakes, which we know is not true, but let's, for the sake of argument, I always say my belief about the second coming is that if there is ever a moment in the history of the world where every single person has love in their hearts at the same moment, that will be the moment, right? When the kingdom of God is truly at hand and Christ comes back and all of that. And so maybe, because I don't know, maybe if we create something that is able to solve all of our problems and that causes us to live in contentment, that will be the trigger to Christ coming again, and then we really will be in heaven. I think it's unlikely, but I think that that's a possibility. But then the last thing I'm going to say is the word we, because I'm very sensitive to this because I'm a church reformer, I'm a church transformer, and I'm not picking on you for saying this, but I think we always talk about what we are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to why I love the encyclical so much. When I go talk to churches, they often enough, people in the room say, we should do this or we should do that. We should start a children's choir. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a homeless shelter? And I always stop them and I say, when you say we, who are you imagining this we is? And if you scratch the surface, it ends up, what they mean is somebody who's not me. It would be really great if in the name of this institution, somebody else did this thing, but don't count on me for that. And so this is the thing that I read in the encyclical that struck me about the encyclical, is that the Pope makes it personal. To me, the question is, how am I going to use AI to make the world a better place or engage with it to make the world a better place? I don't think we can. I mean, if you live in America today, you are using AI, right? If you go to the bank,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to the grocery store, if you drive your car, I don't think that we have a choice not to use AI. I guess if you live in the woods and you live completely off the grid. But how am I going to be intentional about using AI to make the world a better place? And I think, and again, that goes back to the power that we do have.
Yeah,
Sorry, that
I
was a
think
lot.
no. But I think you're right. Is that we forget that it kind of, I mean, it is about, well, I won't say it is about us, but it focuses on what I'm going to do. But, and ultimately it's up to God. But I think that sometimes what I'm hearing from you, and I think there is a lot of truth in, is that we want to take any type of responsibility off of ourselves and put it onto some we out there that's going to do that,
Right.
whether it's the government or the leaders of tech companies or someone. But it really comes down to me. How am I going to use this?
Right, and that's very biblical, right? It was Jeremiah who said, I'm only a boy, right? And Gideon,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God, how are we going to prevail against this army that's so much bigger than us? And God says, I don't know. You figure it out. You're in charge now, right? Like this whole sense of like, and to me, that's also very inspiring because I also think this is part of the many crises that are in our country right now and in our world. I think one crisis is that sense that like, my life has value. I have a calling. What I do matters, and I have the power to make the world a better place or not. And so often I hear people, I'm just a boy, or I have this limitation or that limitation, or I can't possibly do that, or I can't, like, I don't have resources, or I have trauma, or all that kind of stuff. And again, this is not about not having respect and understanding of people's struggles. But I also feel like one of the great things that AI does is it is a great leveler, right? So I don't think you can go to your public library and get on the free computer and use the AI there, right? Like, so it's like, your lack of resources, even your lack of abilities. I mean, again, AI is helping people hear who have never heard before, walk who have never walked before, that sort of thing. It is calling us to live into the fullness of who we're called to be, regardless of the limitations or the suffering that we have experienced in our lives. And I think that's very empowering.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we don't hear a lot in our culture is that we talk about all the things that the dangers of AI, but we don't talk as much about what it can do that's good. One thing I recently read in the news is that they think that, and I think it's from Mayo, that they think that they may have found a way to detect pancreatic cancer years before we can see it on a X-ray. And the way that they did this is that AI could scan in ways and see things that a human couldn't see until it's too late. And
Right.
so that this could actually cut off, that they could actually find it much earlier and may be able to, you know,
Right. Right.
maybe not yet cure, but at least be able to stop its advance far earlier than they could. But we don't hear as many of those stories.
Yeah.
And
And I
here's an
wonder why that
example.
is.
Yeah, and here's an example of where I think artificial intelligence can do something that could actually, as you said, using AI for love, it could be enhance human life in a way that wasn't possible 10 years ago.
Or edit people's genes directly so that like
Hmm.
you don't even have to take horrible chemotherapy or other treatments that are also going to hurt and be off. Like, and yeah, I think the even now, I mean, like right now, you can pay $100 for a blood test that'll tell you if you have any number of cancers in their very early stages, and that's just after like a couple of years. Like we're like the idea that AI could cure all disease in a very short amount of time. I often hear people complaining about like, truck drivers. If we have driverless trucks, then all these truck drivers are going to be out of work. Never mind that truck driving is incredibly dangerous, uh, pays terribly, and and that truck drivers are some of the, that work under some of the worst conditions. And personally, I wouldn't want someone to have to do that. But also that like car accidents and especially truck accidents are like 100% human error, right? And so like everyone gets all upset when the Waymo runs over the cat, but the reality is that like self-driving cars and trucks could potentially probably already have saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. All the people who die in car accidents and motor vehicle accidents. I mean, that's kind of amazing. I want to live in a world where, like, yeah, I'm actually scared of self-driving cars, like, because I'm such a control freak that I'm like, oh no, I want to put the brakes on. Like, what if it goes wrong and it drives me over a cliff? But the actual reality is, your machine is going to be much, much, much safer because it's not going to be driving drunk. It's not going to be distracted. It's going to be going the speed limit. It's going to stop if things go wrong. All the things, right? It's not going to fall asleep at the wheel. And so you're right. I mean, the potential for that is, I mean, I just read an article about, it was in the New York Times, I think, about a woman who lives in remote, whatever, Saskatchewan, and she is elderly. She's 90 years old. She doesn't have family. She lives by herself down a dirt road. And they gave her this little robot. It was this cutest little thing. And it like looks like a lamp and it turns its face towards her when it talks. She knows it's a robot, right? But it checks in with her, it plays games, it asks her to tell her stories, and it can, if she doesn't respond in a certain amount of time, it will call somebody else to check in on her. It takes her
Hmm.
temperature and all that kind of stuff. So guess what? This woman can continue to live on her own in this isolated place where she wants to live because she has this little thing that's like checking in on her, but also keeping her company because she can get lonely, and also very easy to call in for help or alert her daughter or whatever if something happens. Like that's what I say. Like I'm looking forward to getting old and having my robot take care of me. Anyway, but yes, I think there's so many wonderful things. There is a great Netflix show about AI that I just watched. It's very beautiful. Well, you can look it up. It's on Netflix. It's about AI, and it's this guy. Like he's in his 30s, and he and his wife just got married, and they're expecting a baby. And he's totally freaked out about the whole AI thing, and he keeps reading all these things from people that say it's going to destroy the world, and humanity only has like 10 more years, and I wouldn't have kids if I were you, and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, literally can't sleep, and he's like, I've got to find people, oops, who tell me a different story. Like, I can't live like this. And so he goes and finds the same level of qualified people who work with AI, scientists, people, and they say the opposite. Like, it's going to cure disease. It's going to make sure that everybody has some stuff to eat. It's going to cure climate change. It's going to, it's going to make all of our water clean and all of our air clean. And it's going to give us safe places to live and, connect us in ways that we can't even imagine and discover things that, we've only begun to discover. And we're going to live in peace and plenty. And that is just as likely. I believe it's more likely, but there's we don't have any evidence that one of those things is more true than the other. But yet you're right. We almost always hear about the negative.
Do you think that part of the reason there is such a negative view about AI is that people feel burned by social media? And one of the things that I have noticed over the years, and I think that social media has good uses, but I think it also has had bad uses and has, people feeling more lonely and all that stuff. But I remember 20 years ago when Facebook was kind of on the scene, how much everyone kind of billed it as this wonder that was going to do everything. And when the future happened, it didn't happen in the way that we all wanted it to. And I think one of the problems I think also that happened is that maybe at least in some sectors of the church, especially in mainline, we never really asked what were the unintended consequences of social media. And so now everyone's like, oh, this is all terrible. And so now they look at this other technology that's now the nascent technology, and they're thinking, we've been burned already. We don't want to go down that road. And so now people are they're very kind of against AI because of how things turned out with social media.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, but it's so interesting to me too, because I think it's so easy for us to forget. I mean, again, here I am at home. I just spent the other day with my best friend from high school. And the reason that I'm still in really good touch with my best friend from high school is because of Facebook, right? Like, so it immediately made me think about the nearness. Again, my ethics professor, the great Tom Breinthal, who just died recently, he used to say that Christianity is about nearness. It's about who is my neighbor. So who is nigh or near, right? And social media made manifest the nearness of pretty much everybody. So in some ways, that's a miracle, right? We can now be near everybody and anybody. And of course, that has unintended consequences. Of course, we don't want to be near everybody. Of course, not everybody is pleasant to be near. And some people are going to harm other people and all of that kind of stuff. And that's absolutely 100% true. Another person I was just talking with was talking about how the Middle Ages were like the most productive time of human history, like the greatest advancements, because at the beginning of the Middle Ages, most people had never left like a quarter square mile around the place where they were born. Like literally had never been a mile away, not even 5 miles away. And so the isolation that almost everybody lived with, right? And when people finally figured out, was it the printing press? Well, in a lot of ways, it was the church. This person was talking about how it was the churches. Like people wanted to go see the great cathedrals. How were they doing it? And they wanted to meet spiritual teachers. And then they started to pilgrimages, like they just started walking to other places, and then they came in contact with other people and then trade and then blah, 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 blah. So that is a long way of saying, first of all, I think we had like measurably so many more problems when we never left the quarter square mile around the place that we were born. So including a very short and brutal life, right? Like our lives are so much better. But the other part of that is we can be in contact with anybody at any time, right? And again, that's part of the whole, it brings me back to the gospel, because most things do. This idea that like nearness is something that we can have immediately, right? And we're not necessarily prepared for that. And this also goes back to like, who are you in relationship with God? How do you understand yourself to be human? How are you loving other people? Because we then come into this sort of, if you will, artificial nearness, or maybe near in some ways, but not near in other ways, that is sort of warping. And then we can't get away from it. So like that sort of, I feel like there's a spiritual discipline to that has not caught up with the digital age. And I think that, I mean, I think that's what you're articulating, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because we haven't learned, and maybe this is also the job of the church. I'm thinking of that right where you're saying that this is part of the spiritual guidance, spiritual maturity that the church can offer. Is what does it mean? We know what it means. Most of us know what it means to be in Christian community with one another. How does that happen in places where we're not physically near, but we are spiritually near or emotionally near or virtually near? What does that require of us in that sense of hospitality, openness, boundaries, that sort of thing?
Yeah, because I don't think that the church has really dealt with that well about technology, and whether it was social media or then or AI now, is that we don't know. I mean, this is a whole different animal. And as I said earlier, we're not going backwards. I mean, this is all
Right.
here. So the
Right.
question is,
Right.
how do I use it? And I think that that's something that, especially at least in the Protestant world, most of us haven't done a good job. So, I mean, I think that
Right. I think that's true.
that Pope Leo has come out with something that at least is in the beginning of a how do we approach this is important.
Yeah.
And I'm
100%.
also, having gone to school and went to high school at a Catholic high school and all that, I've always had an affinity for Catholic social teaching, because
Yeah.
they at least have an understanding of, here is this world, how do we live in it? And how do we live in it for the glory of God? That sometimes I think as Protestants, we haven't done a good job.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. And that also makes me think when, especially the social media, now AI, like, and how does the church teach and how does it invite us to live into those faithfully? I think one thing that I've been experimenting with lately, and I think that is sort of really interesting, is that we live in a world now where each one of us, personally or as an organization, can create our own digital world, if you will.
Hmm.
Like, instead, like, so, I mean, as small as I created a church chat for my little church, which is, it's like texting, but they use the church app. And so they can all talk to each other, but nobody's in it but them, that sort of thing. We can create digital spaces that are bespoke for our organization or our institution or our community and have people be meaningfully part of them. Right. And so, like, to broaden, and this also goes back to the whole us versus like, getting the government to do stuff or getting the tech companies to do stuff. We as a church can right now create a digital space that people can inhabit the way we want to inhabit it, right? And uphold the values and what we use it for. Um, and then again, just like church itself, I would say not to keep people out, but to set boundaries around what we believe, how we live, what we understand our faith, so that we can bring people in, right? Like, come in here. However, if you come in here and you're abusive, then you're going to have to sit outside the community until or unless you can live within this framework of what we have established here. We're not rejecting you. Like I say, not all people are welcome, but not all behavior is welcome, right? And
Hmm.
so to create concentric circles of relationships that are built upon and again, and truly help one another, right? Share resources, support one another. Um, you know, all manner, pray, all manner of things. We have that power now. We don't have to rely on Facebook anymore, and I think Facebook knows that, right? Which is why it's changing so much. To find each other and to create digital spaces and communities that are in keeping with our values and beliefs for ourselves. And I think that's one of the reasons I love Substack so much, is that's the way they're going too, is that it's become a place. It's not just to blog or to write articles anymore or newsletters. They're actively encouraging us and giving us the tools to create our own digital platform that belongs to us and incorporates people in any way we want them to.
Hmm. Where do
And
you
we can use
think
that for great good.
I think so. Where do you think you see the church when it comes to AI in the next 5 or 10 years? Um, it's moving fast, so
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we're always going to be kind of trying to catch up. But where do you see the church in how it handles
Yeah.
artificial
Well, and
intelligence?
because it's my bias and because it's what I do, I think the church as an institution is not going to change. I mean, I think it's gonna be like, no, 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 no. Even as it continues to happen, like in so many with so many other issues or whatever. I also think we have the possibility, and I think we're doing it. I know I am, to reconsider what it means to be church in today's world from the ground up, and
Hmm.
again, creating new kinds of communities for worship and the practice of the faith and new ways of connecting to the love of God and to loving one another in God's name and what that means with living our lives in that way. And I think spaces that are both digital and foster in person meeting are rising up and will continue to rise up, and we will find that AI helps us and also again back to the whole, I hope the church discovers that it is making it so much more valuable to be human connection, human love, that sort of thing. That again, we have this thing that is precious. How are we fostering sharing it as the church?
Hmm.
Do I think that the current institutional church is going to do much? I don't. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of hope. But again, this goes back to Pope Leo. We have that power. You do. I do. People who follow Jesus do. People who are in ministry, people who want to serve others have that power right now to be creating those things.
And I think that that's one of the things we forget in this kind of digital age is that people don't have to wait for someone on high to make this decision. We can do that.
We can. And I hear people all the time, in the church especially, saying, well, use your voice, use your power, like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but often what they mean is use your voice to complain or to try to get someone else to stop doing what they're doing. It almost hardly never works to try to force other people to do things that you don't want them to do, but they want to do it. And it causes unnecessary violence for everybody. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to use your energy or your voice to try to make other people stop doing things. You can use your voice to start doing the things that you want to see more of and support other people doing the things that you want to do more of. And I think that's obviously much more powerful, but it's also directing your energy. And now we have, ever greater tools. Like, again, like physical diseases, people, scientists, doctors, they are focusing their energy on how can we create an environment to help AI rid the world of disease altogether? Think what we could do as ministers if we said the same thing with how could we help AI help rid the world of suffering and loneliness and division? I mean, that's something I'd sign up for.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll have to do it
So
myself.
knowing you, I can see you would come up with something.
Thank you, Dennis.
So if people want to know more, and I know you have, and your kind of things are kind of in flux, but
Yeah.
um, where should they go? Because you have a lot of stuff that I think would be
Freerangepriest.org.
helpful.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
started all these different things, and then I realized like that was not good, and all the AI in the world can't help me. Like, and again, it's sort of you launch, and then you realize where you could do that better. And so I'm trying to consolidate the things that I have been doing in all these different areas into one place, and it's all just going to always exist at freerangepriest.org. And we're a little bit under construction right now for the summer, but you can still find me there. You can still subscribe, and I'll take you along on my journey.
All right. And
Thank
and
you. This
I
has been a
will
fabulous
say
conversation.
it has been, and I think it's been a hopeful conversation because as I've said
Thank
at the
you.
beginning, a lot of the conversation isn't hopeful, and I think that Pope Leo's encyclical was not as much. I mean, obviously, it did talk about danger, and that's important,
Yeah.
but I think it also talked about hope. Um, this is not, you know, we're not headed towards necessarily headed towards the Matrix or Terminator or something. There is hope because we have hope in a God that rose from the dead. That's and
Right.
That's where we
100%.
can
Oh,
place
I'm
it.
gonna think of one other thing. I know we got to go, but
Okay.
that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
reminded me more and more. I read about tech, like scientists in AI who are becoming Christian, right?
Hmm.
Like they push, when they get to the ends of like, we can do anything and we can build anything and we can have anything, then they feel this sort of spiritual emptiness. Where is the meaning in my life, right? And how more and more tech bros are becoming Christian, right? Because again, they value this sense of being made in the image of God and they want to grow closer to God. And so to me, that's the best thing right there. Like, is that again, when we can do anything, have anything, build everything, it all comes back to love, right? That's the thing that matters for everybody, everywhere, always.
All right. Well, Cathie, so thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, and
Thank
I
you.
definitely will have you back again.
Thank you. I can't wait. And thanks for your time, Dennis. It's always great.
So, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the episode. What do you think? Can AI be used as a tool for love? As usual, you can send me an email at churchinmaine@substack.com. I'm also going to include links to Cathie's article and links to one that I wrote just recently on my Substack that you may want to listen to. Or, I'm sorry, that you may actually want to read. I've got podcasts on the brain here. Also, if you want to learn more about the podcast, listen to past episodes, or donate, check me out at churchinmaine.org. You can also visit churchinmaine.substack.com to read related articles, like the one I just said about AI. Also, I do put these episodes, most of the episodes on Substack. They usually occur about a week after they post on churchinmaine.org. You can also become a member on a paid member on the Substack. I don't really put anything behind a paywall, but if you want to donate, you are free to do so. You can subscribe for $5 a month or $60 a year. And you can go to churchinmaine.substack.com to do that. And there's also, you can also make a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee, and that link is in the show notes. I also hope that you will consider subscribing to the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and that you will consider leaving a rating or a review. That helps others find the podcast. So that is it for this episode of Church in Maine. When you hear this, when it first goes out, it will be on Juneteenth. So happy Juneteenth to everyone. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Godspeed. And I will see you very soon.